On November 22nd, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was shot and killed. He was shot at while riding the presidential motorcade through Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. After his death, the shooter, Lee Harvey Oswald, was arrested, and 2 days later, he would also be shot and killed while being transferred to the county jail. These two events will spark a number of conspiracy theories. So today, we're going to be discussing some of these theories and discussing if the CIA was behind Kennedy's assassination. One of the theories suggests that Kennedy was killed to cover up UFOs. 10 days before his assassination, he demanded that the CIA give NASA full disclosure of their info about UFOs. Conspiracy theorists believe that the CIA had Kennedy killed so they won't have to share their info to NASA and the public. There's really not much else to this theory, but I just thought we'd get it out the way. The Bay of Pigs invasion. After some Cubans fled Cuba to Florida, Dwight Eisenhower, which was the president at the time, before Kennedy, gave the CIA permission to start training the Cuban exiles for a potential invasion on Cuba. Years later, after JFK was elected, just 9 days into his presidency, he would learn about this plan to invade Cuba. Eventually, JFK would approve of this mission, and in April of 1961, 1,200 Cuban exiles attempted to invade Cuba, but they were met with 25,000 Cuban troops backed by Soviet tanks. This invasion turned out to just be a horrible disaster, an embarrassment for the US. After this embarrassing failure, JFK said he was going to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it into the winds. He put all the blame on Allen Dulles, who was the director of the CIA at the time, and all the blame on the CIA for poor planning of this invasion and for deceiving him. On top of all that, John F. Kennedy forced Allen Dulles to resign from CIA director. In other words, he basically fired him. Now, JFK was probably just mad at the time and probably just venting about the whole situation, since it did look pretty bad for the US at the time, especially since they tried to invade a small country like Cuba and failed. But with all that being said, it is possible that someone in the CIA probably took that seriously, and years later they would take their revenge. John F. Kennedy was killed to escalate the war in Vietnam. Some conspiracy theorists believe that Lyndon B. Johnson, who was the vice president at the time, worked with the CIA to take out Kennedy in order for him to be sworn into office and escalate the war in Vietnam. You see, after the Bay of Pigs invasion, Kennedy was very cautious about the war in Vietnam and decided to keep the US out of it because it was really South Vietnam's problem. Those were his words. And it makes sense, especially since the Bay of Pigs invasion went so horribly wrong that he more than likely did not want to risk another situation like that. But eventually, JFK would be killed, and Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in the same day of JFK's assassination. And eventually, he would get the US involved in the war over the fear of the spread of communism in Southeast Asia, which is something that John F. Kennedy would have never done. And this kind of does add up, since Lyndon B. Johnson pretty much did that right away. Just got us into a war with Vietnam that we would eventually lose. So, did they do it? Did the CIA have any involvement with the JFK assassination? Well, probably not. You see, when people bring up the CIA being involved, they tend to avoid talking about how you would need the FBI, the Secret Service, the Dallas Police Department, and to some extent, Lyndon B. Johnson to all be involved together. You have a better chance of cracking every female you find attractive in school, or S-ranking all of Ready or Not on Iron Man mode, than to have all these guys of all these different agencies sit down in the same room for a nice, peaceful dinner. The day JFK was killed, you had all these different agencies like the Dallas Police Department, the Secret Service, the FBI, all fighting each other and who takes lead in the investigation. And you also had people arguing over whether JFK's body leaves Dallas for an autopsy or if he stays in Dallas for an autopsy, which is probably the better option. So, with all that being said, there is no way you can get all these guys to work together to pull this off. And even if you could, in the 60 years, almost 61 years since this has happened, someone would have probably spoken up about it. So, did the CIA do it? Well, Probably not, because there is no way you can get all these guys to work with each other to pull something like this off.